Was a season to forget for the Falcons, and there have been a couple of them, several of them over the past several years. We step into the war room to take a look ahead to 2021, less than 2 weeks from the draft, taking a look at some of the moves the Falcons have made in free agency. Additions, Mike Davis there, Eric Harris, departures of Alex Mack, Keanu Neal. So how would you grade that, and what should the Falcons do in the draft? Let's welcome in our friend, Ryan Wilson, who might be hated on TikTok by 7th graders. Also, NFL writer and insider Jonathan Jones. We'll get to the TikTok later. Let's start with the Falcons. JJ, grade their free agency for me. Give me a recap. Some will go as far as to give them an F. Did they do better than that, according to you?
Well, they couldn't do anything. I mean, they were just in salary cap hell, and you know, they had anticipated winning a lot more games in the last 2 years than they did. Certainly had the talent on the roster to do it, and could never put it together. And so that's what happens. You know, it's not dissimilar from what the New Orleans Saints have dealt with. If the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for example, hadn't won, they would have been in a very similar situation where they wouldn't have been able to bring guys in and bring them back. Instead, they won. Everybody came back. Well, the Falcons, they weren't winning. They didn't have any room to keep anyone, so they had to make a lot of cuts. And, you know, they had to restructure Matt Ryan's deal, and so now they're on the hook for a whole lot of cap space with Matt Ryan, dead money, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to talk more about the quarterback position a little bit later, but they couldn't do anything. So they signed a safety, Eric Harris. They got Barkevious Mingo. You know, they signed Mike Davis, the running back from the Carolina Panthers. And that was about it. They cut a lot of guys that folks liked there within that organization, and they brought in a bunch of dudes that you've never heard of. So that's all that Terry Fontenot, the new Falcons general manager, could really do. They're a veteran-laden team, and they're going to have to get a whole lot better on defense this year.
Yeah, JJ hit on it. That's the issue. The salary cap concerns coming into the offseason, those didn't magically go away, so they had to deal with what they had in front of them, which was, we can't do a whole lot. We're handcuffed. We have to cut a bunch of guys that could perhaps help us, but when you're not winning football games, it's hard to justify paying those salaries. We'll bring in a couple guys that add depth, and then fingers crossed, Arthur Smith, the new head coach, Terry Fontenot, the new GM, we can fix this thing in the coming weeks and months. Not much you can do after free agency in the draft in terms of making your football team better. So it's just going to have to be a wait-and-see approach once the season gets here in 2021. And this could be a multi-year deal in terms of turning this thing around. And I think that is the understanding that owner Arthur Blank would certainly have. But he has been more than patient with the previous regime. At the end of the day, it ended up costing people their jobs because they weren't winning. The big issues for me are on defense, but they do have some holes on offense. And JJ mentioned when you're devoting so much of that salary cap to your quarterback and Matt Ryan, who's 36 years old, that makes it more difficult to do other things in terms of surrounding him with players that can help them win football games. We'll see what happens. 13 days from now, the draft starts, so we'll get an indication of the direction that the Falcons are going, but they have a lot of holes to fill and not very much in the way of draft picks to fill all those holes.
All right, so let's talk about the draft when it comes to the Falcons. They can try to fill at least some of those holes. Now, both of you mentioned big needs on defense. Ryan, we'll start with you. Is that their biggest need? What do they need overall?
Hey, well, I mean, you could just throw a dart at a dartboard with a bunch of positions, and that would be their biggest need, even including quarterback, if you were of that persuasion. But I will start with the offensive line. I don't think, you know, you can say edge rusher, safety, cornerback, running back. You've seen it here. But I'm going to say offensive line. They have Caleb McGarry and Chris Listrom. They're 2 first-round picks from 2 years ago. Those guys are part of the turnaround along the offensive line. They have Jake Matthews, a veteran left tackle. But my lasting image of Matt Ryan is him picking himself off the turf the last few years because he's getting hit constantly. So you could certainly take an edge rusher in the first round, but if you're picking 4, do you want to do that? I think if someone like Penei Sewell is there, and he very easily could be there at 4, that's a real possibility. You can shuffle the line in such a way that you have now 4 guys on your offensive line that you feel comfortable about that can go out there and protect Matt Ryan. Now the conversation becomes, are the Falcons going to stay at 4? Are they going to trade down? Are they going to take a quarterback? I feel like they're probably out of the quarterback business, so there will be teams interested in trading up to 4 to take whoever's left over after the first 3 guys are off the board quarterback-wise. But then how far did the Falcons trade down to get what they need in order to help them get better? You can get an offensive lineman all the way down in the 20s if you're so inclined, but if you're sticking there at 4 and not taking a quarterback, and I'm the Falcons, I'm thinking long and hard about Penei Sewell.
The Falcons need a ton of help on defense. Defense is their biggest need. They have a lot of underperforming defensive players, and they need help in the interior beside Grady Jarrett. They need help on the edge. I'm okay with them at linebacker. They need a better corner. They need a better safety. But you're not going to get any of those positions at 4. There's no value there, especially when Kyle Pitts is going to be sitting right there. We know the first 3 picks will be quarterbacks, and so, yeah, you could get Penei Sewell, but you also have invested a lot at tackle, and you have so many needs as the Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones isn't getting any younger. He's probably always going to be dealing with some type of injury that will not allow him to play all 16 games and get out of his contract after next season. And so I wouldn't worry about, hey, you got Julio and you got Hayden Hurst. Like, you could get Kyle Pitts right there at number 4. And Amanda, the other thing here is the Falcons absolutely want it to be known that they could do anything at number 4. They could trade back. Well, they can't trade up. They could trade back. They could take a quarterback. They could take Kyle Pitts. And talking with folks around the league, a lot of folks don't believe that the Falcons will trade back. I had them trading back in my mock draft and assembling a number of picks, certainly from the New England Patriots, as they made the move from 15 to 4 and having to give up quite the treasure to do that. But if they stay at 4, folks around the league believe that they're either going to take a quarterback or they're going to take Kyle Pitts. I will focus on the quarterback position because they restructured Matt Ryan's deal, and it looks like, my goodness, you can't get out of Matt Ryan's deal anytime soon. You look at 2022, and he has a cap hit of $48 million and $40 million in dead money if you cut him. Well, that's the thing about contracts. They can be restructured yet again. So I wouldn't look at that 2022 number and say, well, no way they take a quarterback and have Matt Ryan on the roster in 22 when he's going to cost $40 million in dead money if they cut him. I think that they could restructure him again and then cut him following that. So who's it going to be, Trey Lance or Justin Fields? Obviously, the Falcons have been at both of their pro days doing a lot of work on both of those 2 quarterbacks, as well as, yeah, sure, Mac Jones. I don't think that that's going to happen for the Falcons there at 4 if he's there. So it's going to be quarterback or Kyle Pitts. That's what a lot of folks around the NFL believe. I think they should trade back and assemble picks and get a whole lot of defensive help.
All right, so we're trying to put ourselves in the situation of the Falcons. Let's talk about the Matt Ryan situation. 35 years old now. JJ, you mentioned his contract there. Pete Briscoe's gone as far as to say he thinks he could play and start for another 2 years here. So do they draft a quarterback? Do they not? If you are the Falcons, Ryan Wilson, not what you think they're going to do, what you think they should do there at 4.
Yeah, if I'm the Falcons and I'm sitting there at 4 and Justin Fields happens to be there, I'm going to the podium and taking Justin Fields. That's pretty easy for me. Matt Ryan, as I mentioned, is 36. JJ went over the salary cap implications, even though you can massage that going forward. This team doesn't have a lot of salary cap space anyway. So I'm taking Justin Fields. Ideally, if you're Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, you're thinking, we don't want to be picking in the top 5 anytime soon, so I don't think we'll have another shot at a franchise quarterback. Let's take Justin Fields. That, to me, seems like the easy choice. But, of course, there are a lot of voices in the room. The most important one is Arthur Blank, the owner, and there are reports that he is leaning towards Matt Ryan as his guy because of loyalty and all the things that Matt Ryan's done, and I understand that, which could mean that they're coming off the idea of taking the quarterback. But JJ's hinted at the suggestion that it could be quarterback or Kyle Pitts. If it's me, I'm making the choice. Justin Fields feels like the easiest pick of the draft at number 4 if there are already 3 quarterbacks off the board.
I like what Ryan's saying about Justin Fields, and I really do like Justin Fields. And again, I think that the Falcons should trade back. But if they go quarterback, I like listen, Matt Ryan's going to be there this year. So Trey Lance, if he's there at number 4, if the 49ers have not taken Trey Lance, this isn't going to be an issue for Trey Lance to sit in year 1. We all know that he's going to need a little bit of development, and that's a really good situation. You can also see Trey Lance in San Francisco as well for the same exact reason. Jimmy Garoppolo should be there unless somebody offers them a first-round pick, unless someone's crazy enough to do that. Justin Fields, I will say this, and I am not saying this about Justin Fields, the person. My goodness, I know how much trouble someone in the media can get in talking about Justin Fields and spreading things about Fields. So I'm not saying this. I'm not saying anyone has said this to me, okay? But Justin Fields is from Kennesaw, Georgia, and he's right from that Atlanta area. He has never been a pro before, obviously. It's really difficult across the board for any athlete to stay at home and be the guy. And sometimes you hear it all the time, and sometimes it's just good for them to spread their wings and not start out their career with their hometown team. And that's the only pause that I would have, a blanket pause about Justin Fields in Atlanta. I think that he is mature enough to handle if it has to be that. But I do think that that is something that I would consider if I'm drafting in the NHL, NBA, in any of the major sports where you're bringing a young man onto a multi-billion-dollar franchise. You're going to pay him tens of millions of dollars to be the face of your franchise eventually. Is it always good for him to be thrust into that spotlight when he's right down the road from all of his creature comforts and home and friends and all of that? So I do think that that would be a consideration if I were a general manager of any team in any sport.
All right, so JJ, let me ask you this, because you're of the opinion that they should trade down. If they do not, if they stay at 4, give me some names that you would like the Falcons to take.
Well, Kyle Pitts is the guy right there. And again, I don't really care necessarily that they have Hayden Hurst. I think eventually you're going to have to move on from Julio Jones. And so you have Calvin Ridley. Let's go ahead and keep that big-bodied receiver like Julio. I'm not saying that Kyle Pitts is going to be Julio Jones, but you can see a pretty natural sort of succession plan there. If they go quarterback, again, because Matt Ryan is there, you can take Trey Lance, the guy who I think has the best blend of brains and brawn in this draft, and be fine with him sitting there. But that's if they don't trade back and assemble a whole bunch of draft picks to fill a whole bunch of defensive needs because they were handcuffed in free agency. So I like Trey Lance there at 4 for the Falcons, and I certainly like Kyle Pitts there at 4 for the Falcons.
Yeah, man, my hunch is that the Falcons probably won't take a quarterback. Even if they stay put, as JJ notes, I think Kyle Pitts, as he pointed out, is the slam dunk easy choice. And I've been saying this for weeks. Kyle Pitts, for me, is like a layup if you're a general manager trying to get the right guy. It's like last year drafting Chase Young. There's no way you can go wrong with that. That's how I feel about how good Kyle Pitts can be. I don't think he dropped a pass at all during the 2020 season, and he's playing against a bunch of SEC guys that are going to be first, second, third round picks, and he's playing at such a that's Kelvin Joseph. He's out running to the end zone. The cornerback from Kentucky, who's going to be no worse than a second round pick. This guy's 6'6", 240, so he just feels to me like an easy selection. I also mentioned Penei Sewell earlier. Again, if Matt Ryan's your guy, you got to protect him. He's 36. He's not in this latest wave of mobile quarterbacks that we're all enamored with. He's a traditional pocket passer, and he needs to be protected. And you do that, he can light you up. So I think that's also another option there. If you're not taking a quarterback and you're not going with Kyle Pitts, get something that's boring in an offensive lineman, but knowing that it's going to protect Matt Ryan for the next year or two.
It's just going to be so interesting. 1 through 3, pretty much done. Quarterback, quarterback, quarterback. But after that, we will see. As JJ said, it's almost like Game of Thrones. The Falcons want everybody to know we decide what's going to happen after this. All right, let's go to day 2. 2 weeks from today will be day 2 of the draft. JJ, we'll start with you. Who are some of the players the Falcons can target then?
Okay, so if they stay at 4 and they don't assemble more picks and they're not going to pick a defensive player there at 4, we need defense if we're the Atlanta Falcons. So I like Jamin Davis, the linebacker out of Kentucky. He very well may go in the first round, but right there at the top of the second round, maybe he can be had. Carlos Basham Jr., Boogie Basham out of Wake Forest. Nice long edge rusher there as they can move on from Dante Fowler. And then, they lost Alex Mack and James Carpenter in free agency, and so I'm looking at the interior of their offensive line. And Alex Leatherwood, the interior offensive lineman out of Alabama, could be there at the top of the second round. Again, another guy who might be taken there in the late first, maybe the Kansas City Chiefs sitting at 31, get some offensive line help. But those are the 3 that I'm looking at. But please, my goodness, Terry Fontenot, focus on the defense.
Yeah, I like the way you're thinking, JJ. I targeted many of the same positions. I started with your guy that you mentioned last segment, Asante Samuel Jr., as a possibility at the top of the second round. As you note, if he's there. He's listed at 5'10", but he plays much bigger than that. He's compared himself to Jair Alexander, and it makes sense when you see him play on the field. He is, at times, dominant and takes over that outside cornerback position. Linebacker position, Baron Browning. I absolutely love Baron Browning coming out of Ohio State. He plays on the edge. He can play off-ball linebacker. He can play apex defender. and he just runs over guys. Sideline to sideline speed, tested really well his pro day. That showed up on the tape during the season. And then, as JJ mentioned, with Alex Leatherwood as offensive line help, I have Jackson Carman there, the left tackle from Clemson, who will probably have to kick inside. But again, that's okay on an offensive line that has some holes to fill. If you don't go Penei Sewell in the first round or Rashawn Slater in the first round, you can find someone like a Alex Leatherwood or a Jackson Carman to help fill holes right away, which is of the utmost importance on the offensive line. And as JJ and I both noted, fixing the defense with those other players that we mentioned.
Guys, we're counting down the days. The draft starts at 4 with the Falcons. Thank you so much, Ryan Wilson. Jonathan Jones here, taking a look at the Falcons' odds. Well, yes, they are in last place to win their division with 10-1 odds, 60-1. If you want to possibly, don't know why you would, put some money on them to win the Super Bowl. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.